The Widow, Episode 29. The large, full moon witnessed the secret meeting of Isabella and Ricardo. Isabella's heart, locked away since the death of her beloved husband, beat strongly, a frantic drum against her ribs. Ricardo, kind and attentive, made her smile again, a smile she thought lost forever. But hidden in the shadows, someone watched them. Cold eyes, full of hate, followed every gesture, every passionate whisper. It was Alvaro, the brother of the deceased, who swore revenge, and Isabella's happiness would be his worst nightmare. What will he plan to do? The night was a dark cloak embroidered with stars, and the moon, a giant pearl hanging in the sky, spied on the forbidden meeting of Isabella and Ricardo. The garden, a labyrinth of shadows and perfumes, hid their secret, a secret that pulsed strongly in Isabella's heart. She, the widow in eternal mourning, felt something she had long considered extinct, a pleasant warmth in her chest, a joy that made her float. Ricardo, with eyes as gentle as the sky after the rain, was the soft breeze that melted the glacier she had built around her wounded heart. She remembered the pain of loss, the loneliness that suffocated her, but Ricardo's presence was like a balm healing the deep wounds left by her beloved's death. The scent of night flowers seemed to dance around them, as light and magical as the first kiss they exchanged under the silvery moonlight. It was a stolen kiss, a secret whispered to the wind, charged with an ardent and repressed passion. Isabella, kneeling before an uncertain future, surrendered to emotion, to desires, to Ricardo's arms. He embraced her affectionately, whispering sweet and tender words that echoed like sleeping melodies in her soul. It was as if time stopped, as if the whole world was reduced to that magical moment, that love reborn from the ashes of pain. But happiness sometimes has a price, and Isabella did not imagine the danger approaching. While Isabella and Ricardo's lips met in a passionate kiss, hateful eyes watched them from the shadows. Alvaro, the brother of Isabella's deceased husband, was a volcano about to erupt. He secretly loved Isabella, a sickly, possessive love that fed on pain and tragedy. The widow's joy was a spinning knife in his heart, an unacceptable affront, a betrayal of his brother's memory. Alvaro was a tormented man, consumed by rage and revenge. His mind, a dark screen where only images of fury and hate existed, was planning something terrible, something that could destroy Isabella's fragile happiness. Alvaro clenched his fists, his fingers white as bones. He watched Ricardo's every gesture, every passionate glance directed at Isabella, and with each passing moment his rage increased, turning into a whirlwind within him. He wasn't content to see Isabella smile at another man. He wanted to destroy her, shatter her, make her feel the same pain he felt. It was an obsession, a sickly desire that consumed him from within. The dark night was the perfect setting for his sinister plans. Darkness was his ally, his shield. He watched Isabella surrender to Ricardo's affections, and blood boiled in his veins. It was the most horrifying image he could conceive. The woman he loved, the woman he thought was only his, in another man's arms. Jealousy, a venomous serpent, gnawed at his insides. He knew he needed to act, that he needed to put into practice the macabre plan he had been silently planning, in the shadows of his own heart. A plan so terrible that it would make even the bravest tremble. Alvaro slowly retreated from the shadows, his steps as silent as a cat's. He had to find a way to separate Isabella from Ricardo, to erase him from the widow's life. He thought about every detail, every step, every piece he would need to place on the board for his evil plan to succeed. The moon, which witnessed the forbidden's passion, also observed Alvaro's cold and calculating gaze, the gaze of someone carrying a heavy burden of hate and revenge. The night was dark, the future uncertain, and suspense hung in the air, charged with a tension that cut like a knife. The fate of Isabella and Ricardo was in the hands of a cruel and implacable man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goal. Love had found a new path, but danger was closer than they ever imagined. What did Alvaro plan to destroy Isabella's newfound happiness? The answer was one step away, ... and the excitement one step away too. The tension was palpable, as thick as the darkness of the night. Alvaro, hidden behind a group of leafy trees, watched Isabella and Ricardo entwined, lost in the whirlwind of a newly discovered love. The sight drove him mad, a corrosive poison that burned him from within. He clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his skin, but he barely felt the pain. There was only fury, the blind rage that consumed him. He needed to act, and quickly. His plan began to take shape in his tormented mind. He knew he couldn't simply attack Ricardo openly. Isabella, with her still hurt heart, could easily believe the gallant's defenses. Alvaro needed something more elaborate, something that would break Isabella's trust in Ricardo, that would make her doubt the man who had finally given her a glimpse of happiness again. In his pocket, Alvaro kept a small object, a key, which belonged to an old abandoned house on the outskirts of the city. It was a house that held a dark secret, a secret that could destroy Ricardo's reputation in seconds. Alvaro smiled, a cold and cruel smile, as he thought of the image of sweet Isabella crying, heartbroken once more. He imagined the pain in her eyes, the disappointment in her voice, and this image fed him, igniting a hellish fire in his chest. He knew that Ricardo had a troubled past, things he had carefully hidden from Isabella. Alvaro had scoured Ricardo's past, searching for any information, anything he could use against him. And he had found something, a vital piece for his malevolent plan. He had found the address of that old house, a place where Ricardo had been involved in a scandal a few years ago, a scandal that could forever tarnish his image in Isabella's eyes. As he walked away from the garden towards the abandoned house, the moon seemed to mock him, casting its long, sinuous shadows in his path. Alvaro, however, didn't care. He was determined. He would destroy Isabella's happiness, even if it cost his own soul. On the way, he remembered Isabella's passionate gaze, the sparkle in her eyes when Ricardo touched her. And this memory, instead of shaking him, propelled him even further. Isabella's pain was his fuel, his source of power. Upon arriving at the house, the old and decaying structure seemed to whisper stories of mysteries and secrets. Alvaro entered, the old key turning in the lock with a cracked and sad sound like a farewell cry. The smell of mold and dust filled the air. Cobwebs covered the dusty furniture, and the silence was heavy, oppressive. Alvaro searched the house, looking for the definitive proof, something that could definitively incriminate Ricardo. He knew what he was looking for. He knew that the proof was there, hidden in some dark and forgotten corner. After hours of tireless searching, he found it. A photograph, yellowed with age, revealing Ricardo in a compromising situation. A situation that, if revealed to Isabella, would have a devastating impact on their relationship. It was the proof he needed, the perfect weapon to destroy the happiness he so hated. Alvaro smiled again, a triumphant smile, as he held the photograph in his hands. His plans were working, and revenge was closer than ever. He left the house, the photograph safely tucked away in his pocket. The moon continued to illuminate the path, but now the night seemed darker, gloomier. Alvaro felt powerful, imbued with a dark, unstoppable force. He would walk to Isabella, offer her the raw truth, and watch the destruction of her love with perverse and sickly pleasure. The night was theirs, Alvaro's and his macabre plans. But the price of revenge, he didn't yet know, would be very high. The moon, a silent witness to a reborn love, cast its silvery light on the garden where Isabella and Ricardo were embraced. The scent of night flowers was sweet, almost magical, but the atmosphere carried an invisible tension, a premonition of danger. Isabella, with her heart finally open to love, felt happiness pulsing in her veins. She had found a safe haven in Ricardo's arms, a man who made her smile again, who made her forget, even for a few moments, the pain of loss. Ricardo, in turn, was completely enveloped by this strong, determined woman, yet so vulnerable. He saw in her eyes a reflection of his own soul, a search for peace and happiness. But this happiness was a fragile flame, threatened by an approaching storm of hate. Suddenly a shadow fell over them. It wasn't just any shadow, but a heavy, oppressive presence, charged with a sinister energy. It was Alvaro, the brother of Isabella's deceased husband, his dark eyes full of rage fixed on Isabella and Ricardo. He approached stealthily, each step heavy like a death sentence. Isabella and Ricardo, distracted in that loving complicity, didn't notice his arrival until it was too late. Alvaro, standing like a statue of hate, let out a cold laugh, a sound that froze the blood in Isabella's veins. Without a word, he pulled an old, yellowed photograph from his pocket. The photograph showed Ricardo in a compromising situation, a past he had so carefully hidden. It was an image that, when revealed, could end everything Isabella had built with so much effort. Isabella's momentary happiness seemed to crumble like a house of cards. Isabella, initially confused, looked at the photograph with wide eyes, her heart pounding like a hammer against her ribs. Ricardo's image was undeniable, and the situation presented in the photograph was, to say the least, suspicious. She looked at Ricardo, seeking an explanation, but her eyes found only an eloquent silence that echoed the terrible truth revealed by the photograph. Tears began to stream down her face, mixing with the rain that had begun to fall, as if the sky were crying with her. The man who had promised her a new beginning, the man she trusted, was involved in something she couldn't understand, something that was tarnishing the image she had built in her mind. Ricardo tried to explain, to defend himself, but the words seemed trapped in his throat, failing, useless in the face of the irrefutable proof in hand. Isabella, hurt and betrayed, moved away from him, feeling her heart break into 1,000 pieces. The joy she had felt moments before turned into a deep emptiness, a searing pain. She felt betrayed, not only by Ricardo, but also by the cruel fate that insisted on stealing her happiness. The rain fell harder and harder, washing away her tears and her dreams. Alvaro watched the scene, a cruel smile on his lips. He had achieved his goal, to destroy Isabella's happiness, to drown her newly discovered love in the sea of disappointment. But the victory seemed more bitter than he had imagined. He watched Isabella cry, devastated, and felt a twinge of guilt, a tightness in his chest. He had won the battle, but the war within himself was far from over. Hate had given him victory, but it had also robbed him of peace. The dark night, a silent witness to his revenge, became the stage for an even greater tragedy, the destruction of a heart that had already suffered too much. The rain continued to fall, washing away the scene, erasing the moon's glow, leaving only a scene of desolation and sadness. Isabella, alone, enveloped in a sea of tears, faced the uncertain future, carrying the weight of a new disappointment, the bitter taste of betrayal. Ricardo silently watched his love collapse, the weight of guilt and remorse falling on him like an avalanche. And Alvaro, the architect of the tragedy, withdrew into the shadows, not knowing whether the victory he had won would bring him the peace he so longed for, or only the emptiness of eternal loneliness. The night, once enveloped in magic and love, was now only the deep darkness of betrayal and despair. The rain fell in torrents, washing the garden as if trying to erase the marks of that fateful night. Isabella, wrapped in a thin coat, watched the rain fall, each drop seeming to echo the pain that tore through her chest. The photograph, proof of Ricardo's betrayal, was still in her hands, cold and implacable. She felt a chill that came from within, a chill that no rain could alleviate. The image of Ricardo, smiling and affectionate, now mingled with that of the cruel photograph, creating a whirlwind of confused and painful emotions in her heart. Ricardo tried to approach, but Isabella repelled him with a harsh, painful gesture. His words, once sweet and tender, now seemed empty, powerless. He tried to explain, to justify, but the words died in his own throat, suffocated by guilt and anguish. The silence that followed was even crueler than any accusation. It was the silence of betrayal, the silence of the end. Alvaro's figure loomed in Isabella's memory, a dark specter haunting her thoughts. Was he right all along? Did Ricardo always deceive her? Doubt gnawed at her, deeper than any physical wound. The trust, so arduously won, had shattered into 1,000 pieces, dissolving like sugar in the rain. Suddenly, a scream cut through the silence, a scream of pain, of despair. Isabella turned, her heart freezing in her chest. It was Ricardo, fallen to the ground, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. A figure was approaching him, slowly, his hands raised, ready for the final blow. It was Alvaro, his face contorted in an expression of blind fury, and in his hands, a gleaming knife under the faint light of dawn. The knife shone like a falling star and descended like lightning. Isabella screamed, desperate, running towards Ricardo, but it was too late. The knife reached its target, penetrating deep, in a tragedy that would forever mark her. Alvaro, triumphant, but with an empty gaze, observed his handiwork. He had achieved his goal. He had destroyed Isabella forever. But was Alvaro really so sure of his victory? The rain continued to fall, a veil of water over a bloody stage, a final act that sealed Ricardo's fate and left Isabella plunged into a deep and desolate uncertainty. But before falling into deep despair, Isabella noticed something. A subtle change in the gleam of Alvaro's eyes, a tremor in his hands, an expression of regret that mingled with that face enveloped in hate. What does it mean? Did blind revenge strike him too? What will happen to Isabella now? The silence of the night carried the answer, but this answer had not yet been revealed. The camera closes on her face, flooded with tears, with Ricardo's bloodied face in her field of vision, leaving the mystery in the air for the next episode. Will she be able to survive this tragedy?